You're a musician.
I'm afraid so.
And what sort of stuff did you do, or do you do?
Well, I was brought up on swing and jazz, but I've always loved country music. And the band in Southend, which finally became Hurston Wells and the Marksmen, we played a lot of country music, and consequently we were booked with lots of the big stars. I worked with Johnny Cash and Jim Reeves, Dolly Parton, Skeeter Davis, Billy Joe Spears, I don't know, George Hamilton IV. I don't know. You name them, I've met them. I still like it all. I mean, I still love country music, and I play steel guitar, pedal steel guitar as well as guitar. I can scratch my way around a mandolin and a banjo, but they're my two main instruments. And although I'm unfortunately now suffering, as I've told you, with arthritis, I'm afraid I can't not only play my instruments properly, I can't pick them up.
Oh.
So that part of me has gone to the past now.
So tell us about how you got involved with the band and how all that sort of started.
Well, I was trying to think, really. I was approached by a guy, somewhat older than me, called Norman Hull, who played guitar, and he used to come round to my house 2 or 3 times a week, and we'd sit and play together. We'd usually play swing, and we slowly got into playing some country, and I just really taught myself over the course of time. It was called The Marksman, and our singer Andy was renamed by EMI Hurston Wells. He's now dead, unfortunately. Now he died in last year.
And what era are we talking? 19?
Oh yes, late 60s.
Oh right.
Mid to late 60s.
That was a heck of a time.
It was a hell of a time. Yeah, it was very special. We did our first television show in, I think, about 1963, 64, and we did one more, but that I can't remember. But after that, I became a session musician and moved to London, and there I just played with just so many people, I just can't name them. It's one of those things, it's a bit like being a bricklayer or something. You know, you do your job and you give them your invoice and wait for the money.
But that must be, you must have picked up an awful lot of really good stories.
Really good stories. Well, some funny ones, yes. I mean, we were on the first Beatles tour when they did the tour of Scotland, which was when they had She Loves You in the charts. And I do remember being in the dressing room, and Ringo, unfortunately, I'll just put it nicely, he passed wind in the dressing room, and he was chucked out of the door by the rest of them, and he was standing there in just his white underpants and a vest. He was saying, "Oh, come on lads, let me in, it was only a bloody fart," he said. So that was that. But we'd taken him in and gave him a beer, and that was that. But there's, I don't know, these things I can't recall them all now. Yeah, I met Paul a few times at EMI because I used to do sessions there. So
have you met him since?
Have I met him since? No, I haven't.
Now, you mentioned about country music.
Mm.
And are you familiar with any mechanisms within the industry of how artists would get on when they otherwise wouldn't? Where they make arrangements and certain contracts?
Yes, that happened in our case when it was someone at EMI who decided that Hurston Wells, the singer, was going to be the star, and so he got quite a lot of money. He got about a £40,000 advance, and we got paid £36 each as a session fee. Yes, yes.
Not joking. That's a lot.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, he bought a brand new car, and he bought a farm, and lived very well. and we went off our separate ways. I went to work for a while with Burns Guitars in London as a demonstrator, and I used to help Jim Burns with creating new types of amplifiers and pickups and things like that, which I found quite enjoyable. And of course all the session musicians used to come into the showrooms, and I got to know them. And Big Jim Sullivan, who was one of the most favourite ones, used to keep booking me on my steel guitar. In the end, I had so many sessions to do, I had to give up working for Burns, and I became a full-time session musician. But in the meantime, I was playing with 2 or 3 different bands. We went to Germany, we went to other parts of Europe, France, Ireland 2 or 3 times. And it was a very good time. I got to meet some marvellous people. I've managed to get, I've got 5 solo albums as a guitar player. I'll show you them a bit later.
Yeah.
Picture of me with all my long hair and the...
Slightly bushier beard as well.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, I'll show you in a minute.
But this brought you to different places. Did it bring you onto places where you were able to pick up some information that you wouldn't normally pick up?
Yes, mainly the American air bases is which I've made some notes about my first UFO sighting, and I think it's my 8th one is my air base story, which is the most incredible of the lot.
What on earth thought, I mean, you're an artist, what made you even think about UFOs?
Well, because in about 1950 I was with my mum, and she was a good mum, not the kind of lady to leave a boy indoors while she went to the shops. So she took me. We lived in a place called Warrior Square, which is right in the heart of Southend, and she needed to go to the pharmacy. So we went out the door, and lo and behold, what did we see was a policeman with his bicycle. They all had bicycles in those days, and a group of people around him, and they're all looking and pointing up at the sky. A few yards away was another group of people, and another group of people, and another group of people, all looking up at the sky. So we looked up at the sky, and what appeared to be hanging over the pharmacy and the high street was a pink-coloured disc. The moon was on the left, and it shone its radiance on one side of this craft. It was quite still. I think it might have just been vaguely turning very slowly.
So the moon wasn't full?
I don't remember if it was full or not, but it was enough to cast a metallic sheen on the side of this craft. And I said, "What's that, Mummy?" And she just hurried me along, because it wasn't long after the end of the war, and she probably thought it was a German secret weapon or something.
Yeah.
And anyway, we went to the chemist and came back, and the groups of people were still there. But this thing was drifting off towards the Thames estuary, and that was the last I saw of it. But
is there any reason why you think it was a UFO rather than?
Well, I didn't know what it was. I wasn't what it was, but I started to read some things about it, and I used to, on a Saturday and Sunday morning, I used to go up the hallway and collect the paper for Mum and Dad, and they always used to get the Sunday Express. And I looked at the front headlines, and it says, American Airman Photographs Flying Saucer, and there was a picture of this one that an American airman had taken. It was the headlines of the Sunday paper. And I showed it to my mum, and we became interested and started to get the few books which contained information about it. And about 1952-3, I was in the back garden with my dad, and I just happened to glance over the fence, and there was this cigar-shaped brown thing which was slowly moving away. Not head first, it was moving that way, and it was going further and further away, and it disappeared. So that was the second sighting I'd had.
Can you describe these objects at all? Is there any details that you...
Not really. I mean, I can still see them in my mind now, at my old age. The pink one I saw with my mum was a disc, and it had a raised top, not very much. And as I say, it was pinkish in colour. And that's all I can really say about that. The one I saw with my dad was like a cigar. It looked like a cigar. It was brown, and as I say, it tumbled slowly across the sky and disappeared.
When you mean it tumbled, it just...
It moved like that, but there was a slight turning motion in it as it went. That's all I can tell you about that.
How did you see there was a turning motion? Were there details or anything on it which you could show that it was moving?
I think it was just a light on it, really, Miles. That's all I can say. But it did seem to have that movement. Anyway,
Lasted.
Well, half a minute.
But if you put your hand at arm's length, would your thumb cover it?
Yes.
Your thumb would cover the moon as well, wouldn't it?
A bit of it. Yeah. You know, if the cigar was like that, I mean, I'll put my thumb up. There's that.
So I'm trying to see how big it was.
It's hard to estimate the distance.
Thumb or tennis ball.
I would say.
Would cover it, or football.
I would say that it was the length of 3 double-decker buses. That's a guess.
Yeah.
Can I just ask what age you were when this...
Let me see. 43, 53. I was 10, and my first one I was about 7. And then later on in the 50s at high school, with lads at school, we were in the playground, and one of the boys said, "Look at that." And we looked up, and there was a silver disc, just a flattish silver disc, once again with a slightly raised top. And it was very slowly just creeping away from us, going down towards the estuary once again. And all the boys were going, "Wow, what was that?" The word flying saucer was mentioned because it had been heard. And,
all essentially local to...
Yes, it is. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, those incidents, my mum bought a copy of George Adamski and Desmond Leslie's book Flying Saucers of Landing, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And it was funny because some years later, let me just tell you about this. In 1961, outside a club called the Smugglers in Hullbridge, which isn't far from here, Hullbridge is on the River Crouch, and the club is right on the edge of it virtually, and across the other side of the river was a copse of trees. Now, we'd finished the gig, a band. It was part of the Marksmen and a couple of new guys, but we were bringing the gear outside to put into our respective cars. And over the other side of the bridge in this copse of trees was this tubular object, not cigar-shaped. It was like a cigar case, if you like, which was also a kind of a pinky brown, pinky orange colour, and it was just hovering near this copse of trees, and there were little spherical balls which were slowly going round it. I think there was 3, maybe 4 of them, and everyone was chattering and talking about it. There must have been 20, 30 people watched that. I mean, I've only had one instance where I've seen one on my own. All the rest of them have been with people, which has been a good thing, really.
What was the atmosphere at that time?
What
UFOs? Was there any? Was it?
I mean, I think for the people who witnessed it, I mean, I was keenly looking and interested because I didn't know exactly what it was, but I knew it belonged to the UFO category. But the people there were interested. They weren't scoffing it. In fact, one guy got in his car because he was parked in the pub opposite, and he tried to go round and over the bridge to get to it. And he came back and said the road was cordoned off by police, and they wouldn't say why or anything.
That's very interesting.
It is.
It was sufficiently close.
Oh yes, I mean
low level that you could.
Yes, I mean the River Crouch is about as wide as this garden from here to the back gate, and just beyond that.
That's about maybe 20 yards.
Yeah, and about 20 yards again, was this copse of trees. And funny enough, I went there with Victoria last year, and I've been telling her about this experience, and I said, I'm going to go down and have a look at that copse of trees just to look at the Smugglers Club from the other side, which we did do, and the copse of trees have been completely taken down, and it was just grass. I don't know whether that's anything to do with it or not.
So this happened immediately after, soon after the...
I have no idea. No. I mean, this sighting was in 1961 or 2, and when I went to the River Crouch with Victoria, that was only last year, 2013. So anyway, what was this one here? Oh, the spheres.
What did you feel about this? Did this give you any...
I was amazed and pleased. I was pleased that lots of people saw something that I've studied, and I don't want to say believe, because I know.
Right, that's very important.
You know.
Why do you know? What gives you that conviction?
It's part of an inner feeling. It's part of the excellence of some of the photographs that I've taken, that I've seen, and my experiences talking to American airmen, and especially a retired colonel, which I'll come to soon. Okay, after that I was with my mum and dad in a car. It was about 1962. We were coming from Holbridge because my dad was friendly with the landlord, and I was in the front with my dad and my mum was in the back, and we were passing by fields, and there was a silver disc lazily and very slowly going across this field, and then it disappeared into some trees, and I didn't see any more of it.
With any size, details?
Size, it's so difficult, Miles. Pretty big, I would say. I'd say 70 to 100 foot diameter, something like that.
How high off the ground, I mean?
Oh, it was quite high. It was above tree level, or most trees, until it went behind a whole lot of trees, and then we didn't see it because Dad was still driving. So.
And that was in this area?
Holbridge is about Rayleigh, CS5. It's about 9 miles away.
I mean, essentially, broadly speaking, you've got a lot of fairly substantial, fairly close CE2s, in this area.
Yeah. I mean, I've had long gaps of seeing nothing, which I'll tell you. Okay.
I mean, we're not too far from Southend Airport then.
No.
It
was called Rochford Aerodrome in those days. Very small.
Yeah, but seeing planes around was not unknown. I mean,
oh no, I knew the difference between an aircraft and that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, you're familiar with the things.
Also, I mean, aircraft make a noise. These were absolutely silent.
Even the ones only like ADR?
Yes. Yeah. Not a sound.
Wasn't a hissing sound?
No, nothing. Not a thing.
Daylight sightings?
Yes, except for the one at Holbridge, it was just started, the sun starting to go down. Let me see. The same year, I was with my wife at the time, that's Saul's mum, Angie. We were down at Holbridge and we were going to the Smugglers, but we stopped just before the river on the Holbridge Road because there was a typical Adamski type saucer hovering over the river. It was exactly like you see it in the photograph, with the portholes and the ball landing gear, and it was just literally hovering there.
Where was this exactly?
Holbridge. Holbridge it's about, you know, Rayleigh?
Yes.
Yes, it's about 4 or 5 miles from there, northwest.
See, some people would suggest that those are very similar to German technology from war.
Mm-hmm. I've heard this.
Like that? You've heard anything?
I have heard such things, yes.
And what do you think about that?
I can well believe it, knowing that, having visited Germany and knowing quite a lot of the people. I mean, they are excellent at construction,
Which part of Germany were you?
We were stationed in Wiesbaden, and from there we went all over Germany. But
Which part was Germany's at? That would have been West Germany.
I think so. Yeah, my geography is not the best.
How do you spell it? Wiesbaden?
WEI SBADEN, Wiesbaden. Baden is.
What gives you any reason to think that German flying saucers would be around?
Having read about the possibility with several authors, and once again some information.
1960s.
1960s.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't think about them being German or anything like that then. It was much later when I started to read a lot more, and when in 1973, when I had my experience on the airbase.
Does this mean that you believed all UFOs could possibly be German?
No.
No. I mean,
No.
Because I think it sounds like you're going off on a tangent here.
Yes.
What you're saying you saw the Adamski craft,
Yes.
you had no idea of where this would have come from at the
No,
time?
the way it was constructed, I couldn't see a bolt or a screw. It looked like it was made by some other method. It was all like one entire piece, and it was a bluey grey, beautiful looking thing. I mean, it was breathtaking. That's the only time I've ever seen one like that, and I could relate it to the photographs that Adamski took in his book.
But what made you think, when did you feel that they could have been a man-made technology?
Well, I never thought they all could be, just by the photographs in books, the ones I've seen, and a few of the photographs that I've seen which does look like they've got nuts and bolts, like that one I showed you on the wall, put it that way.
And that had that looks like a constructed photograph.
Yes.
And does it say roughly where that was?
I'm not sure. Certainly a part of America and over an American airbase. That's all I know. The origin of where that photograph came from is unknown. It was a friend of mine who gave it to me. And when I looked at it, I'd already seen it on the airbase. I'll tell you the story in a minute. I'll just get to...
Shall we allow Pete to go through chronological
Yes,
order
yes,
of
absolutely,
his
yeah.
experiences
Yeah.
and then...
Well, I did say it as I was going along. My first one was about 1950. Second one was 1952 to 3. Late 50s at high school. 1961 at the Smugglers. About 62 with my mum and dad in the car. And the same year with my wife Angie at Holbridge. That was an Adamski style hovering over the river. Now, this is an interesting one. In 1963, I was on my own. I was driving from Southend in my minivan in the early morning, about 6 o'clock. I went up the A127 round the North Circular Road, because there wasn't an M25 in those days, and picked up the M4, I think it was just about built. I was going to Newbury to pick up a steel guitar that had been built for me, and right across my vision as I was driving came very slowly and lazily this silver disc about the size of a 10p piece, if it was held at arm's length, and as it moved across, it slowly turned, and like it had all the time in the world, it went right across my vision, and once again was heading towards the estuary. And I looked around, I wanted to find another car or witness. Nobody at that time in the morning. Nothing. So that's the only one I've had on my own.
It suggests that there may be a landing place here.
It does, doesn't it? I'm trying to think where. Now, one of the other things which I haven't written in here, and I wanted to tell you, was when I was playing with my band at the Smugglers at Holbridge, I was introduced to a guy who was a friend of the landlord's son, and he was an explosives expert. And we were talking about this and that, and he'd been all around the world. He'd been around Wales, Ireland, various parts of England, France, all around Spain, Italy, Australia and New Zealand, creating huge underground caverns. He said after they'd finished, in came the other labourers and electricians and bits and pieces and all that. And I thought that was very interesting because there's never been any mention of that in the papers. And as
Where?
Pardon?
Any idea of where?
Where? He didn't name a particular place. He just told me the countries he'd been to. And I found it interesting because I was then starting to read and hear about underground bases and things like that.
Any idea how these huge caverns were made?
Well, as far as I know, from what he told me, they went into what was already existing caves and used dynamite, I suppose, or something else, and then cleared it all out with huge, great machines. And
just basically conventional mining.
Indeed, as far as I can tell. Because, as he said to me, you know, he said that after him and his team had done what he had to do, the other experts came in. So they just went off to another side.
Did he tell you which company he was working for?
No, he didn't.
No.
Are these all NATO countries? All based in Europe?
Well, Europe, as I said, Australia and New Zealand. He didn't say anything about Japan or the Far East at all. Maybe they have their own.
Did he imply that these were military projects he was working on for governments or military?
He did imply that, yes.
How did he imply it?
Oh, it's a long time ago.
Any details?
Not really, no. He just said it was for the government, basically. That's nice and vague for you. But that's all I got out of him. Now, the most important one was I was working with a band, and I can't remember the band's name because it was a time when I was working with several at an airbase, American airbase in England, not too far from here. And I was playing my steel guitar with my guitar on my lap, and I used to, in tunes, I would play sometimes the verses on the guitar, and then I'd hop my lead into the steel guitar and play the choruses on the steel guitar. And in the break time, the singer said, right, we're now going to have a short break. And these three guys came up to me, Americans, and one of them slapped me on the shoulder. He said, hey, what part of the States you come from, boy? And I said, I'm not, I'm from South-on-Sea, Essex, mate. And he went, God damn, like that. He said, you play just like one of those guys out of Nashville. And I said, well, that's very, very kind of you. I said, no, I said, I'm Englishman. And anyway, we talked a bit more about music and what we liked and one thing and another. And then it was, I went to the bar and someone passed me a couple of drinks, so I went back down. And then in the next break, as we usually played from 8:30 till midnight, we used to do an airman's club, then we do NCO club, and then we do an officers club. Not all in the same night, but sometimes we'd stay over at the BOQ, called the Bachelor Officers Quarters. Anyway,
Was it Bedwars?
No, it wasn't. I've played at Bentwaters many times, but no, this wasn't. I'd rather not say, just for safety reasons. So I went up to the bar, and the three guys were there with a couple of other fellas, and I said, listen, you guys questioning me all about music. I said, you fellas fly these really new super aircraft, don't you? And they were going, yep. So I said, tell me something. I said, in your flights, have any of you ever come across any UFOs? Wrong. One of these guys, I'd never seen this before in my life, but his eyeballs shivered. And he started going, well, at this time we feel it, and he came up with a load of like pre-programmed nonsense. Another guy turned his back and went to the bar. Another guy walked off to the side. And within about 2 or 3 minutes, 2 large black gentlemen with a thing on their arm, like a plastic white thing that said MP on it, which is military police, I assume.
Yeah.
They said, you just got to come along with us, boy. So I said, why? What? They said, just come along with us. And that was it. I said, well, I've got my band, I've got to go back. They just got me by each arm, took me through the door to a door marked authorised personnel only. And we went down, and I just never realised these police took me down in a lift. It must have been 5 or 6 floors. And I never realised the air base was that deep. Anyway, we came to a room which they opened the door and ushered me in, and it was a series of long tables. There was about 8 or 9 guys sitting there, and they had what I had never seen before. This is about 1973. They had flat screen computers. Now, I had never seen a computer in 19...
We've only had the last...
Yeah, exactly. But the main guy who wanted to speak to me, he turned it round to me. He said, "This you, Willsher?" I said, "Yes, it's me." He had my grandparents' name and address, my parents' name and address, what schools I'd gone to, every detail about me. And he started saying, what organisations do you belong to, and what are you questioning these airmen about, and all this. It went on and on. I said, well, look, I said, I'm a musician. I said, it's a hobby of mine, that's all. Just like music is a hobby for your airmen. And he was going, we don't believe that. So anyway, the door opened, and in come this guy, all dressed. He was a retired colonel. He had the cap and all the...
Retired?
Yes, but he loved it so much, they kept him on. He was still there. Well, he was there for the dinner and dance,
Well, that's interesting. We need to talk to you about why you did that. Play with the microphone.
Why I play with the microphone? I had an itch.
Where did you have the itch?
In my shoulder.
Do you want to come back in with a retired colonel?
Hold on here. You have the itch where?
I did have a little one. Just
yes, but where exactly?
in my shoulder. Just
what
there.
Part of the shoulder?
Just there.
Right. And you started to talk that it's important. Why you should have an itch?
I don't know. One gets these things.
But it's when we mentioned.
I think what Miles is trying to imply that you started to become nervous when you were telling this part of the story.
Okay.
Because it sounds like an interesting part of the story, perhaps, or is there something else?
Not really. No. He when he came in, I mean, he, as I say, he had all his medals and all his bits and pieces, and the hat with the braid and all the things, and the guys stood up and he just said, I'm not sure this is right. He said to one of them, he said, "Are you Willsher?" He says to me. I said, "Yes, sir, I am." He said to one of the other guys, he said, "Get me it was something like a BO 251 or something." That's not right. That's just made that up. But they gave me this form. Gave him the form. He said, "Right, stamp it," and he got a stamp and he stamped it, and he signed it, and the colonel signed it. He said, "I'll deal with this in the morning." And then he said to me, "Are you staying over tonight?" I said, "Yes, we're at the BOQ tonight. We're doing the NCO club tomorrow." So he said, "Right," he said, "come and have breakfast with me tomorrow." He said, "and I'll show you a few things." So I went back to play with the band, and they were curious, but I didn't tell them anything, really.
All you've done is ask an innocent question. Have you seen any UFOs? And then they haul your ass down to the secret underground base, which you didn't know was there, and they fill out a form.
Yeah.
What other technology did you see, or what other things did you see?
Just these,
which looked rather modern.
Not anything I could see really. They had a kind of a television screen, but it looked more like something you'd shine a film onto. It's difficult to go back, you know. It's a long time, 20 odd.
Can you think about things? It was like a three-dimensional screen.
No,
Maybe putting words in
it just
your
looked like it looked like a white screen. It was about 3 foot wide by about 5 foot high, and it was behind all the guys on another table. Anyway, long and short of it is that I woke up the following morning, and he showed me where his office was, because when I went upstairs with him, he said, my office is the third door down on the right here, and you've got to go back down one flight, and you'll be in the officers club. So I did that, and the following morning I went to his office and knocked on the door, and he invited me in, and he sat down with me, and he went to a drawer and he got out some photographs. He said, these are gun camera photographs. He said, you know what that means? I said, well, not really, because I guess. And they were brilliant photographs of all kinds of different kinds of UFOs. There was one that was a bit Adamski-like. A lot of them were flat discs, and 2 or 3 of them were rather like that man-made one that I showed you. And he said, we've been involved with this for many, many years, and he said there are only a select number of people who know it all. He said, I'm not one of them. He said, I just know a certain amount. He said, just get the passage of it all. Yeah, photographs. What else did he just told me a few things. He said a lot of the airmen have had encounters. He said I gather, because I told him what I'd been asking. He said a lot of them have had mid-air near collisions sometimes. He said with things, he said, which are pretty unearthly. But he suggested that there were companies throughout the world who had been experimenting for many, many years with circular craft, which went on a principle, hang on, what's it called? The Mercury engine principle. Ah, that was it. I didn't know what that was until he explained to me about what happens when you put a ring of mercury and put heat underneath it and it spins. Yeah.
Is it red mercury?
I don't know.
Red.
I don't know. Oh.
Okay. Well, I think...
you want to go in?
I think that's time for a theme change.
Okay.
Okay, we'll hold on the red mercury.
Well, as I said earlier, the American pilots came up to the stage and asked me what part of the States I came from, and I grinned and said, no, I'm sorry. In fact, they said, what part of the States you from, boy? And I said, I'm from Southend-on-Sea in Essex, actually. And he said, you play just like one of those guys out of Nashville. And I said, well, that's very complimentary. I said, but I assure you, I'm from Essex. And we talked a bit more about music, and then I was brought a couple of drinks from the bar, and I resumed another half an hour, 3/4 of playing with the band. And then in the next break, I went up to the bar, and the 3 guys were there. There was another couple of guys with them, and I started talking to them about, I said, you guys fly these top secret supersonic aircraft? They said, yeah, we do. I said, tell me something. Have any of you ever encountered a UFO? And one guy, the guy I was first talking to, his eyeballs shivered. I'd never seen this ever on a human being before. And he immediately started coming out with something like, well, at this time we feel that, and he went rambling on like on some pre-programmed speech. One of the other guys just turned his back and went to the bar. Another guy went off to the side, and came back a few minutes later with 2 military police, 2 tall black guys with MP on a white thing on their arm. And
Is there anything you can remember what that other US Air Force guy said when he started to ramble on or say something? Is there anything
he said something like, we feel at this time that any discussion with the public about secret aircraft is forbidden, or something. It was something along those lines.
What I'm suggesting is there was something that was said which required you to be brought to the military police.
Well, it was just me questioning airmen about UFOs. I mean, it was a pretty tight security base. And obviously, UFOs were a subject which was obviously discussed among officers and the pilots. But for a civilian, a British civilian like myself, it was obviously completely banned. And I had no idea. I was just following up my hobby.
And this is not too far from Southend.
It is. It's a fair distance. It's about as far as Oxford.
Right. So it's basically.
It's a well-known American air base, but I mustn't tell you. I mustn't. Yeah. In fact, you've still got my discussion with the Colonel, haven't you? You've still got that. Okay.
But the thing is, you were saying earlier that there was a certain time limitation that you had that you could talk about this. Are you still within that time limitation?
I don't understand.
I think you mentioned something like you couldn't talk about it for 15 years.
Oh yes, he asked me, he said, please don't discuss this, what I've shown you and what we've talked about for about 15 years, and please never mention my name.
Okay, so he said you can't mention the name, you're past the 15-year limit.
Yes.
So you're safe.
I have told a few people, only a few.
Okay.
And
but this is your first time you've said it in front of a camera.
Yes, it is.
And this is for the Basis Project, and it's going to be published on YouTube. Are you okay with that?
I'm fine about that.
Okay. So tell us what then happened. What happened?
Well, after that...
You met with the Colonel.
Yes, the following day.
We'll redo that bit. We met with the Colonel, and where did you meet him for?
I knocked on his office door, which he'd shown me. It was about 11 o'clock, and we had some lunch, and then he took me back and opened a few drawers and brought out some photographs of what he called gun camera photographs, which I didn't know the expression at the time, but I understand now they were photographs taken by airmen with a special camera attached to guns, I suppose, and some of them were pretty amazing, some of them were flat discs, some of them were cigar-shaped objects. There was a couple that were what I would call Adamski-like, but they were very clear, very sharp. Most of them looked alien in the fact that they all seemed to be made out of one piece, whereas a few of them appeared to be what I would call nuts and bolts.
This means that the size of the object that you were looking at on the photographs, were these like 10 by 8s?
Something like that, yes. Yeah.
Or roughly A4 size.
Yeah.
So the size of the object itself that you were looking at, how big were they in the photograph in terms of filling the size of the photograph?
Nearly edge to edge.
Really up close then?
Yeah. Or either that, or they took them with a camera that could zoom, you know.
But as far as the photograph is concerned, you had basically a really good look at what was there.
Yes.
So that's how you were able to determine that it was a continuous piece, or one was made out of nuts and bolts.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, because I'd noticed before on a few photographs in books that the majority of them, which people call alien, was because we, as far as I know, don't have the technology to make something in one piece like that. There wasn't a weld mark, there wasn't any sign of engineering.
Were these colour photographs?
Yes.
And were there any symbols or any kind of detail that you could recall on these craft?
There was one that appeared to have. It looked like a large elliptical letter 8. It was like but it wasn't quite an 8. It didn't have the top parts of it weren't joined. The circles as a separate semicircle at the top. But I could only see it because it was at an angle, so it was very difficult to determine exactly what that was.
Were there any other details in the photograph which could give you any idea of where they were taken above ground? I mean, obviously above ground, but
not really. No, there was. They were mainly taken in the air.
But so right up and close, there wasn't any other.
No, just cloud.
No, those weren't over a city or something like that.
No.
And were these photos in a file?
They were in a, yes.
And so they were pulled out. Were they? Did they look like they were all the same size, and so they'd been printed for?
For him, I should think. Yes, I've no idea really, to be truthful. But yes, they were of a size, and they were in a stiff card file, which he had to undo the little clip at the front to open it up to get them out.
Was there any classification on the top of the file that said like top secret?
Not a thing.
Any
Not a
words?
thing. Not that I could recall at all.
And was it just photographs, or did you see papers in there as well, along with the photographs? Even if you didn't manage to read those papers, were there any other?
Let me just go back. Not that I can really recall. That particular drawer in his desk were full of other files with lots of papers in. Whether that was a particular UFO drawer or not, I have no idea. But he only showed me the photographs and talked with me about them.
What did they call the objects? UFOs or missile?
Yes, yeah. Craft was his most used expression.
And were they in good condition?
Oh yeah, what the craft of the photographs? The photographs were excellent condition. Yes.
So they didn't look as if they'd been handed around a lot.
Not at all.
Fingered and used. Or
No.
Curled up at the edges. Or
Not at all.
Could we sort of walk through your entry? If you imagine going back there in person now, and sort of you've been invited into an office,
Yes.
and are you seated or are you standing?
I was standing first of all, and then he said, "Sit down." He had a desk, just like a teacher's desk, with a seat on his side and 2 or 3 on the other side, of which I sat in the middle one.
And can you go through kind of in chronological order what he would have started telling you, and then what you remember it finishing up with at the end before you...
Oh, he was kind of jocular at first. He was saying, "I don't know what the hell you're doing talking to those guys about that stuff." He was kind of like quite joking and friendly about it all. He said, "I said I'd show you some stuff, so here it is." And then he got up and he went to the desk. And he showed me things, and he would occasionally say, "What do you think about that?" Or "Look at this." That was it.
Was there anything else in the room which inferred that it was a slightly different technology? You said initially when you first went that they had things like laptops.
Oh, downstairs. Yes, just the laptops. They what looked like a screen to show film on. That's all I can describe it as. Apart from that,
Was it a different screen than you would, for instance, see in a cinema or anywhere else?
I didn't really think about it. It was just a white piece of material, about 5 foot by, I don't know, it's smaller than that anyway. Yeah, just a plain white, God knows what the material was. I can't...
Was it different to a normal screen you'd
Not
seen
really.
before? It was just an ordinary projection screen.
That's what it appeared to be.
And what did these other desktop things or laptop things look like? Could you give any further details on that? Did they have a keyboard, for instance?
Yes, it didn't have a keyboard like a computer has a keyboard. It had something like 4 or 5 buttons which could be pressed to access various things.
Now buttons with this. I'm going to go with buttons with a
Press button.
the mechanical press
Yes.
buttons. Like
Yes.
if you wanted to.
Yeah. I'm afraid my attention wasn't so much on that. I was being given the third degree, really. So it was just things I noticed. I didn't see a telephone at all, but a few of the guys had something in their ear without a cable. I remember that. Something in their ear with a little something that just attached to the lobe. That's about all I can remember.
Did they have what kind of uniforms?
They had typical American uniform, the slightly khaki shirt, and matching trousers, really.
Any insignia?
A few of them did.
Like lieutenant or?
I wouldn't know.
Or
No chevrons or anything like that, no.
any name tags on the front or?
I think there were name tags, but honestly, I didn't really pay that attention because, as I say to you, I was being grilled.
So, in other words, in terms of uniform, underneath the base, was there any difference that you would notice between any uniform that you would see above ground on the base?
No, the guys appeared to be wearing similar things to which the fellows upstairs were wearing. Some of them were obviously on leave and were just in normal clothing. But a few of the guys still had their shirts on. Perhaps they changed their trousers or something, but that's about it.
Was there any other, any sidearms, any
No.
kind of weapons that they had?
Not at all. Not that I noticed, anyway.
In other words, you weren't being held there with guards.
Not at all. No.
You know, M's.
Just a light, a little smaller than that, but just aimed at me, and a gentleman sitting underneath it asking me all these questions.
So you were, in some respects, like we are now. You've got a square light shining down on you.
It was a
smaller.
round light, I remember, actually, but however,
And they sat you down on
opposite him at the end of the
a
table.
chair you were sitting on.
A chair, yeah.
Was it? Did it
A wooden chair, just a standard wooden chair.
And did they take any samples? Any
Nothing,
fingerprints?
nothing. They knew more about me than I knew about myself, I think.
And again, what did they know about you? They knew that you.
Well, they, as I said, they had my grandparents' names and the address where I was born, which was my mother's father's house. They had my mother and father's name and where he worked, and they had all the schools that I went to.
Are your grandparents indigenous to Britain?
Oh yes. Well, I say that my great-grandparents. A thing I was going to have a laugh with you about when you were telling me about your Irish inheritance. According to my ancestry, I'm apart from English farming stock, I've got Spanish, Egyptian, Jewish, and Irish, which makes me something like Pedro Isis O. Isaacs, I think.
Do you have do you know your blood group by any chance?
No, I don't actually. I've never really had any reason to know that.
So you were shown 10 photographs, 5 photographs?
About 9 or 10, something like that.
I'm curious. When you sort of were speaking to these guys at the bar, how soon was it between being at that bar and being 6 floors down?
Oh, I see.
Questioned?
I was talking to the boys for 2 or 3 minutes before the one that went off came back, and he came back. There were 2 military police. They weren't exactly with him. He went off slightly to the right, and the military police came towards me. I think he'd pointed me out to them. And then by the time I went down there, I suppose 5 minutes, 6 minutes.
So pretty quick then.
Pretty quick, yeah.
So what happened to you immediately after they told you to come back in the morning? Anything at all?
No, they didn't tell me to come back. It was the colonel who told me. I went up in the lift with him.
Right. How long were you in the lift?
I don't know, a few minutes, as long as it takes to get 5 or 6 floors, really.
Did the was there anything at all different about the lift?
Not really.
Were there a lot of buttons on the lift?
No.
How did they go between floors?
I can remember seeing numbers in green and a push button next to each of them.
So was there, in other words, was there a button for each floor?
Yes.
There wasn't one button that selected the floors?
Not apparently. As I say, it's the thing, I didn't take much notice of him because the Colonel and I started chatting in the lift, and my attention was really on him.
But how did you divulge that he was retired?
Oh, he told me.
I'm a retired colonel.
Yeah.
In an active US Air Force base.
Yes, yes. He said quite a lot of us who have enjoyed the work, loved the work, are allowed to stay on or come back every few weeks or something to help and advise people.
Did you go in daylight, for instance? Was there anything?
Yeah, we were in daylight when we came. It must have been 5:30, 6 o'clock on probably an October evening, something. So it was getting gloomy.
So how many were in the band that night that were
playing?
5
of us.
5. And when you came there, were you being housed for hotel purposes on the base, or did you?
Oh, we were just told that we were. No, we stayed at what's called the Bachelor Officers' Quarters, BOQ.
So you were able to stay there overnight.
That's right.
Okay. When you actually went, did anybody that was part of the band see this incident where you got taken by the military police?
Yes.
They saw, so there were
Yeah.
witnesses to this.
Yeah.
Do you think any of your band members might remember that event?
I can't remember who they are. I know that 3 of them are dead because they were older than me.
Sorry, yes.
No, it's all right. No, I can't think. In fact, I think Twiggy's dead. Mm-hmm. We had one guy called Twiggy. He was 28 stone.
Right.
Our bass player. But no, I think he's passed away.
Did they? When you came? What I'm getting to as well is when you came back. Were you allowed to stay on the base that night? When all this had happened, you've been.
Oh yes, I came back and
stayed on the base.
The boys had started without me, but I was basically the band leader, and so they could sing a few songs and do a few things without me. But
so this was prior to you actually getting up on stage.
Oh no, we'd already done one set.
Oh, you'd done one set. This was before the second set.
And it was the guys who, when we said, in fact, the singer said there'll now be a short intermission or something like that. These are the guys that came up and asked me.
During the intermission, but because you weren't actually there on the second half for a song or so.
1 or 2 songs, yeah.
Right, I see. So did the guys ask you, where
yeah, they did. They said, I just wrote it off. I said, they just were complaining about me questioning Airmen about UFOs. And the boys in the band weren't too interested in UFOs, and they just kind of went, oh yeah, you and your flying saucers. And,
so it wasn't an untypical topic for you to talk about?
No.
And you'd been to bases before?
Oh, yes.
So you must have remarked in the past about these?
The opportunity hadn't really come because most of the other bases that I played on had a dance floor with tables and chairs all the way around the outside, and a dancing area and a stage with stairs going up to it. So it wasn't so easy for... we were apart, yeah.
What ultimately made you feel why this had happened? Did you feel any reason why me? I mean, all you've done is just pass a couple of counter remarks.
Well, I realised that it was a much more serious subject as far as the Americans were concerned than I had previously imagined.
What about those objects, those 10 photographs, or 8 or 9
approximately,
yeah. Did any one of those things look familiar to what you'd already seen?
Yes, a couple of them. That one I told you where I was with my mum and dad in the car, and this one went slowly across a field until it went behind the trees. There was one very similar to that. In fact, a couple were similar to that. There was one very Adamski-like and one cigar shape. But the one I saw with my dad, as I said, was a kind of a browny colour, whereas these were metallic.
And were these the continuous ones, or the continuously formed ones, or were they the nuts and bolts ones?
No, the continuously formed ones.
And what did the nuts and bolts ones then look like?
Maybe we can get that picture from my other room, because they look like that, more or less.
Looking at.
Now the thing about this photograph is...
I've got a good shot of it here if you just want to keep it back shot.
The thing about this photograph is...
That's good.
Is that a real photograph, or is it a composite photograph?
As far as I know, it's a real photograph, because this is very similar to one he showed me. And actually, I made a mistake earlier on. There was a couple where you could see buildings below.
Okay.
But only as vaguely as that is.
Where did you get this photograph from?
A colleague gave it to me.
Yeah, it's got disclosureproject.org on it, hasn't it? So it's,
Yes.
it's a fairly
Are those
recent
being
one.
stuck on then? Those labels, or are they part of the photograph?
They're part of the photograph.
Yeah, it's been printed like that.
Yeah.
But where he got it from, I've no idea.
This was very representational of the type of thing you were shown
Is
by
that
the Colonel.
from the science fiction TV series V?
No.
No. This is. I can tell by looking at that, especially where the light's hitting it, and yeah, you can see it's very. What I call nuts and bolts. There's all these bits and pieces all over it. Where
In some respects, that looks a little bit like some of the Nazi alleged designs from the end of the war.
So you say yes.
But there's another former military person, a guy called John Irwin, who has witnessed UFOs a little bit like that in the late 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
Nuts and bolts stuff.
Mm.
That was near Syria.
Mm.
Okay.
So there were objects, there were craft in those photographs.
Similar to
little
that,
bit like
yes.
Now, looking at that particular craft, you said they're similar. What differences are the ones?
Oh, blimey. You're testing my memory now.
Can you think through that?
Take your time.
For instance, that has got a sort of a slight lip on the edge, and
Yeah, a very slight extra section on the top. Let me just think about it. I mean, you can't actually see what I call rivets and nuts and bolts here, but just the way it's constructed, it looks like there must be.
in the same way that if you look at a jet airliner, you know it's not made of one piece of metal.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good description. A few of them had a glow about them, an auric kind of glow, usually whitish. Some of them had like a red tinge underneath, just like mist.
Right.
That's about it.
So that, and you did you actually see the gun?
Oh yes, in
those pictures,
yes,
with the gun
in most of
Sort of
them.
like, and then
Yeah.
with the,
I think some of the pictures I saw were actually taken by a man with a camera, and he bypassed the gun, I think, but a lot of them had the gun in.
But what did you feel about this? This is shocking.
It amazed me and excited me as well, because it's not something I've ever been afraid of. I've been interested in the occult and mystical things, UFOs and such things, since I was a little boy, since that experience with my mum, you know. So to me it was just reinforcing in lots of ways things that I'd felt and thought about.
Have you had any experiences with anything other than people?
How do you mean?
I'm saying, have you had any visitations or any missing time or events in your life which you can't explain?
No, I've had no missing time. But I know of a band, and I can mention their name, the Moody Blues.
Yes.
My friend Robin Lumley, who is Joanna Lumley's cousin, he and I were great friends and music partners for years. And he introduced me to Graham Edge, who's the drummer from the Moody Blues. And in the early days, when they were just a very up-and-coming rock band, they were coming back in a transit van, as we all used to, from a gig, and the driver could see in his rearview mirror a light following them, quite a light surrounded by a huge aureola. And he said, "There's a hell of a light behind us, guys, following us." And we all turned around and could see it. And then it came over the top of the vehicle and went into a field, a farmer's field, quite a little way ahead, and settled. So the guy pulled up on the other side of the road. It must have been early hours of the morning. And they got out, and 2 or 3 of them went into the field, and the others wouldn't. They were very afraid and stayed right by the van. Then the other 3 just ran out and came back into the van, and they drove off, and they didn't see that thing again. But Graham came round to my house when I lived, pardon me, in Maida Vale, and we talked about it, and he drew some pictures of, oh yes, some little beings came out of it. Very much like the ones you see with the big eyes and the large head and all that kind of stuff. And he drew them on some pieces of paper. And I gave them to Saul, my son, and he still has them somewhere, Graham's drawings.
How was the craft landed? Any details about it? Was it
Not at all. It was dark, it was pitch
anything?
black.
Any
It was pitch black. It was just a disc-shaped craft with a cupola on the top, and it just settled into the grass of a field. I didn't get any more details as far as I can remember.
Was this reported? I think Sol